The afternoon sun was gentle, resting low in the sky as the woman drove along the quiet road. She wasn't in a hurry, but her mind was full, drifting from one thought to another after a long day. She didn't even notice she had gone slightly above the speed limit until she saw the flashing lights appear in her rearview mirror. She let out a small breath, not annoyed or worried, just preparing herself for an interaction she knew well. She slowed the car, signaled, and pulled over to the side of the road. The officer stepped out of his patrol car with a steady pace, his expression firm as he approached her window. To him, this was routine, another driver who needed a reminder to be more careful. She lowered her window and looked at him calmly, waiting for him to speak. He gave a short nod as if he expected her to be nervous or apologetic. Instead, she remained steady, her hands resting clearly on the wheel. "Do you know why I stopped you today?" he asked, sounding confident that she had no real idea. "I think I might have gone a little over the limit." She replied in a calm tone. Her voice surprised him. Most people, he thought, would sound unsure or defensive, but she sounded almost like she expected this. That small detail made him straighten a little, as though he needed to reassert his authority. "I'll need your license and registration," he said. She nodded and moved slowly, deliberately, so there would be no misunderstanding. She handed over the documents without a word. As he glanced at them, he noticed the neatness of everything: the organized wallet, the calm eyes watching him, the measured breathing. Something about her told him she wasn't just another driver on the road. Still, convinced himself that she was simply confident, maybe even a bit too confident for someone being pulled over. He took a moment longer than usual examining the documents, trying to read more about her from the details. But nothing unusual stood out. The name, the address, the information, all ordinary. He handed her documents back and leaned slightly toward the window. "Where are you headed today?" he asked, not because he needed the information, but because he wanted to understand her calmness. "Just on my way home," she said softly. Her tone wasn't rude, and it didn't challenge him. It was simply honest. But he felt a hint of impatience rising inside him. Something about her confidence made him feel like she was holding back, like there was more she wasn't saying. He tried not to show it, but it nudged at him. Cars passed in the distance, some slowing down to glance at the scene. The woman kept her eyes forward, calm, almost serene. The officer shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "You seem very relaxed," he said, hoping to catch some reaction. She smiled slightly. "I've dealt with stressful moments before. This doesn't worry me." Her response caught him off guard. Most people tried to explain themselves or justify what they did, but she didn't. She simply accepted the situation. For a moment, he felt curious about her, wondering what she meant by stressful moments. He wasn't sure what to make of her. Her confidence didn't match the situation, at least not in the way he expected. He told himself he needed to pay attention, to make sure everything was in order. Maybe she had something in the car. Maybe he needed to check further. But she didn't look like someone hiding anything. She didn't fidget. She didn't avoid eye contact. She didn't offer excuses. She simply waited, as though she had all the time in the world. The officer took a step back and looked at her car, scanning it slowly. It was clean, organized, nothing out of place. He tried to find a reason for his growing curiosity, but nothing obvious appeared. "Would you step out of the vehicle for a moment?" he asked, wanting to observe her more closely. She didn't hesitate. She nodded, unbuckled her seatbelt, and stepped out with the same calm presence she'd maintained from the start. She stood straight, hands at her sides, her posture steady but not tense. He watched her, waiting again for some sign of nervousness. "There was none? Is there a problem?" she asked gently. Her tone wasn't challenging. It was simply a question, a simple, respectful request for clarity. "No problem," he said quickly, though he felt something shift inside him. "Just routine." She nodded again and looked toward the road as another car drove by. The breeze pushed her hair slightly, but she didn't move to fix it. Her presence felt grounded, confident in a way he couldn't quite place. He took a moment to observe her again. Something didn't match. She didn't seem irritated about being stopped. She didn't seem worried about getting a ticket. She didn't even seem inconvenienced. She seemed prepared. Prepared for more than just a simple stop. He tried to shake off the feeling, reminding himself that not everyone reacted the same way. But the longer he stood there, the more he felt like he was missing something. Like she knew something he didn't. She waited quietly, not pushing him for answers, not asking why he needed her out of the car. Her silence wasn't heavy, it was controlled. Controlled in a way he didn't often see in traffic stops. "All right," he finally said, trying to regain the rhythm of a routine check. "Just stay right here for a moment." She nodded once more and kept her eyes on the passing road. As he walked back toward his patrol car, he found himself glancing over his shoulder at her. Something about her made him more alert, more curious, more aware that this stop might not be as simple as he first thought. But he didn't know yet just how far from ordinary this moment would turn. For now, all he knew was that the quiet woman by the side of the road was not reacting like anyone he had stopped before. And deep down he sensed that there was a reason for that one he was about to discover soon enough. The officer returned to the woman after a few moments, trying to maintain his usual calm authority. He had checked her documents quickly and nothing seemed unusual. Yet, as he approached her again, he noticed the steady look in her eyes. She didn't fidget. She didn't smile awkwardly. She just watched him, patient and composed. There was something in the way she carried herself that made him pause for a brief second, but he pushed the thought aside. This was still a routine stop, and he intended to handle it as such. "Ma'am, do you mind telling me where you're coming from?" he asked. His tone was firm, a little sharper this time. He wanted a clear answer and expected hesitation. But she gave it promptly and clearly, as if she had rehearsed it 1,000 times. "I just finished work," she said softly. "Nothing unusual today." He nodded slowly, but the way she said it, so calm and deliberate, made him raise an eyebrow. Most people in this situation would offer extra words, excuses, or apologies. But she didn't. She gave him just enough information and nothing more. He wondered if that was a sign of confidence, or if she was hiding something. Either way, he had to proceed carefully. "Step back over here for a moment," he said, gesturing toward the sidewalk. She moved without hesitation. Her movements were precise, and he found himself paying attention to every step. She wasn't afraid, and she wasn't disrespectful. She was just present. He looked at her more closely now, examining her stance, the way she held her shoulders, the even breathing. He tried to detect any signs of stress, any hint that she might be concealing something. But there was nothing. She was calm, confident, and fully aware of her surroundings. He felt a twinge of unease. He wasn't used to this. Most people were nervous during a stop. Most people showed some sign of fear or frustration. She showed nothing. "I need to ask you some more questions," he said, trying to regain control. "Would you mind answering honestly?" "Of course," she replied, her voice steady. "I always try to be honest." Her answer was simple, but the sincerity in it caught him off guard. Most drivers would respond automatically, nervously, but she responded with calm intention. He noticed her eyes, how they didn't dart around or avoid him. She was meeting his gaze evenly. He had to admit internally that it was impressive. Not that he would admit it out loud. He began with basic questions. Where she worked, how long she had been driving, what her plans for the evening were. Each answer was clear, short, and polite. But he noticed subtle signs that made him pause. She spoke with authority in her voice, even when giving ordinary answers. It wasn't arrogance. It was experience. There was a hint of someone who had faced bigger challenges, someone who knew how to stay calm under pressure. He shifted slightly, trying to hide his curiosity. "Do you have anything in the car that you shouldn't?" He asked standard procedure, but with a slightly sharper edge now. He was testing her. "No," she said immediately. Her voice didn't waver. Nothing unusual. Her quick and confident response made him hesitate. Most people might stumble, hesitate, or sound uncertain, but she didn't. He felt a rising tension he couldn't explain. She wasn't being confrontational, yet she commanded attention just by being present. He reminded himself that it was a routine traffic stop, and he needed to stay professional. He glanced around. noticing a few passers-by watching from a distance. A neighbor had stopped to observe, curious about the officer and the calm woman at the side of the road. The officer felt a sudden awareness that this wasn't just another ordinary stop. The woman's calmness and authority made the scene feel heavier somehow, though it was still just a quiet street. He reminded himself again that it was routine, but he couldn't shake the subtle unease. "Do you mind if I check the inside of your car?" he asked. His tone was polite, but firm. He wanted to assert control, yet he also wanted to see how she would react. She stayed silent for a moment, thoughtful, before answering. "May I ask the reason?" Her calm request for clarification surprised him. Usually people would either comply immediately or argue, but she asked politely, without aggression. He felt a flicker of doubt about how this stop was going. "Standard procedure," he said quickly, trying to sound convincing. "Just a routine check." She nodded slowly, still composed. "All right, I understand," she said. He motioned for her to step aside slightly so he could inspect the vehicle. She stayed in the same spot, watching him, observant but unhurried. Her eyes followed every movement he made, and he realized she was paying attention in a way that most drivers did not. She wasn't just compliant. She was aware. As he leaned into the car to look around, he felt a flicker of self-awareness. This was unusual. He wasn't used to people noticing small things he did during a stop. Her presence was strong, not overpowering, but enough to make him feel observed in return. He checked the glove compartment, the seats, and under the console. Everything was normal, just as she had said. There was nothing to find, nothing suspicious. Yet the way she stood there, calm and confident, left an impression on him. He felt the weight of how different this stop had become compared to all the others he had conducted. Finally, straightened up and turned to face her. He wanted to close this part of the stop quickly, to regain his own composure. But he noticed that she was still steady, her expression unreadable, calm but alert. He realized he had underestimated her from the start, and that realization made him tense slightly. This wasn't just another driver. There was more to her, something he couldn't place. "You're very calm," he said, almost involuntarily. She gave a small smile. "I try to stay calm. Yes. It helps in situations like this." Her answer was simple, but the way she said it suggested experience. Not just experience in driving or traffic stops, but experience in handling situations under pressure. He felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. He didn't know who she really was, but he knew that she wasn't ordinary. The officer took a step back, keeping a polite distance. He realized that the routine stop he expected had shifted into something entirely different. The calm, confident woman before him had subtly challenged his assumptions. He had thought this would be easy, a simple traffic stop. But he now understood that he had misjudged her entirely. She didn't try to impress him or intimidate him. She simply stood there, composed and aware, leaving him to confront the truth that he had underestimated her. The quiet strength she displayed was both unsettling and remarkable. For the first time that afternoon, he began to wonder just who she really was and what her presence here truly meant in that moment. The officer realized that his assumptions had been wrong. The woman was far from ordinary, and she had shown him that calmness and confidence could speak louder than words. He felt a flicker of respect, even as he tried to maintain his authority. The stop was still ongoing, but the balance had shifted. The quiet woman at the side of the road had already left a lasting impression on him, one that would linger long after this routine afternoon ended. The tension between the officer and the woman began to grow subtly, almost imperceptibly. The street remained quiet, with only the occasional car passing by, but the air felt heavier. The officer could no longer ignore the awareness that this stop was not like the others he had conducted. Something about her presence was different. It wasn't threatening, and it wasn't aggressive, but it demanded attention. He tried to mask his growing unease, reminding himself that he was still in control. "Ma'am, need to ask a few more questions," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "I want to be thorough." She nodded slightly, her expression neutral but attentive. "Of course." "I understand," she replied. He noticed how deliberate she was with her responses. She didn't speak faster than necessary, and she didn't hesitate unnecessarily. Every word was measured, calm, and precise. It made him second-guess his assumptions once again. He had expected an ordinary driver to stumble under pressure, perhaps argue or apologize too much. But she was unlike anyone he had encountered during a traffic stop. He took a deep breath and decided to escalate slightly, following standard protocol. "Do you have any weapons or illegal items in your vehicle?" "Nothing illegal," she said calmly. "No weapons either." Her immediate and confident response caught him off guard. He expected a hesitation, a nervous tone, or at least a pause. But she had answered in a way that left no room for doubt. He had to admit to himself quietly that she was different. His next step would require him to be cautious. He wasn't dealing with a nervous driver. He was dealing with someone alert, aware, and capable. "Would you mind if I check the car more thoroughly?" he asked, trying to maintain authority while observing her reaction. She paused for a moment, thoughtful. "May I ask why?" The polite but firm question made him realize she was not someone who would blindly comply. She had an understanding of her rights, and she wasn't afraid to assert them politely. He felt a twinge of irritation mixed with respect. "Routine check," he said quickly. "Just standard procedure," she nodded, as if accepting the answer for now. But the slight raising of her eyebrows hinted that she was processing everything carefully. She was not just compliant. She was evaluating the situation, quietly assessing him as he assessed her. The officer realized that the balance of power in the interaction was shifting, and it made him slightly tense. He leaned toward the car to begin the search, moving methodically as he had been trained. She stayed back slightly, her posture relaxed but attentive. Her gaze followed him carefully, noting every move. He realized she wasn't just watching. She was reading his actions, understanding the subtle cues in his body language. That was unusual even for experienced drivers. He opened compartments, checked under the seats, and examined the trunk area. Everything was in perfect order, exactly as she had claimed. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. Yet her calmness throughout the process unsettled him. Most people would shift nervously, make small movements, or mumble explanations. She made no such gestures. She remained still, quiet, and fully composed. It was almost as if she were trained for situations like this, though he couldn't imagine in what capacity. Finally, he stepped back from the car, feeling a mix of frustration and curiosity. He wanted to close the stop, to return to the routine he was familiar with. But he couldn't ignore the fact that she had completely disrupted his expectations. Her calm and controlled behavior had challenged his assumptions, and he realized he had underestimated her from the beginning. "You're very calm," he said. Almost unconsciously, she gave a slight, knowing smile. "It helps to stay calm." "Panicking doesn't solve anything," she replied. The simplicity of her statement, combined with the weight behind it, made him pause. She wasn't just calm for the sake of appearances. She was calm because she had experience handling pressure. There was wisdom in her voice that he couldn't ignore. He felt a moment of self-awareness, realizing that he had judged her too quickly. "Do you often deal with situations like this?" he asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Her response was measured. "Every day in different ways. Sometimes you have to stay calm even when things get complicated." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He could sense the truth in them. She had faced challenges he had no knowledge of, and yet she handled them with quiet confidence. It made him realize that this traffic stop, which he had thought would be ordinary, was turning into a lesson in humility and awareness. Bystanders, who had been watching from a distance, began to notice the unusual interaction. The woman's calm presence contrasted sharply with the officer's procedural insistence. People walking or driving by slowed slightly, curious about the interaction. They could sense something different about the woman, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. There was an aura about her that drew attention without demanding it. The officer, now fully aware of the unusual nature of this stop, tried to regain control. "I need to ask you a few more questions about your vehicle and your belongings," he said, trying to sound professional, yet authoritative. She nodded, still calm, and waited for him to proceed. Every word, Every gesture, every pause seemed deliberate, calculated, and precise. He felt a subtle shift in the interaction. He realized that he was no longer simply enforcing a routine stop. He was engaging with someone who could navigate pressure and complexity effortlessly. He asked questions about the car, its ownership, and her recent activities, all while observing her reactions closely. Each response was precise, composed, and entirely consistent with her earlier demeanor. There was no hesitation, no nervousness, and no defensiveness. She answered honestly but sparingly, giving him enough information without oversharing. The officer began to feel a mixture of respect and caution. He had assumed he was dealing with someone ordinary, someone who could be easily managed. But this woman had dismantled that assumption through nothing more than her presence, calmness, and awareness. He felt both impressed and slightly intimidated, though he reminded himself that he needed to stay professional. At that moment, he realized that the interaction was no longer just about enforcing the law. It was about understanding and responding to a person who was exceptionally composed, confident, and aware. The routine stop he had anticipated had transformed into an unexpected challenge, and he couldn't help but feel that he was learning something important. The woman, meanwhile, remained steady, patient, and observant. She hadn't raised her voice or shown frustration. She hadn't tried to dominate the conversation or assert herself aggressively. She had simply remained aware, composed, and present. The officer realized that her behavior had altered the dynamic completely. He had underestimated her, and now he understood that he needed to proceed with both caution and respect. The interaction continued, each moment revealing more about the woman's composure and awareness. The officer could feel the shift in the situation. Recognizing that this stop was not routine and that he had underestimated someone who clearly had experience in handling complex situations. His assumptions had been challenged. He felt a growing sense of humility mixed with curiosity. As the interaction carried on, the officer realized that he had much to learn from this encounter. He couldn't predict her next move, and he couldn't assume she would respond like any other driver. She had demonstrated control, calmness, and awareness beyond what he had expected. And while the stop was still ongoing, he understood that this moment would leave a lasting impression, a reminder not to judge someone solely based on appearances or assumptions. The tension that had been building along the quiet street finally reached its peak. The officer stood at a distance from the woman, fully aware that the routine stop he had anticipated was far from ordinary. She had remained calm and composed the entire time, answering his questions politely, precisely, and without any unnecessary words. Yet the calmness was not ordinary. There was a subtle intensity behind it, presence that made him reconsider his earlier assumptions. He could feel the eyes of a few bystanders on the scene. Their curiosity was palpable, and some whispered to one another as they watched. The woman remained unaffected by the attention, her posture steady, her expression neutral but attentive. She seemed completely in control of herself, as if nothing happening around her could disturb her. The officer, fully aware of the unusual nature of this stop, tried to regain a sense of authority. He spoke clearly, maintaining the professional tone he had practiced countless times. "I need to verify something further," he said, gesturing to the vehicle. "It won't take long, just a quick check." The woman nodded once, a small gesture acknowledging him without hesitation. "I understand," she said calmly. Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone used to dealing with unexpected situations. It wasn't defiant, and it wasn't dismissive. It was simply matter, of fact. He began a more thorough inspection of the vehicle, checking compartments he hadn't yet examined, carefully scanning for anything unusual. But everything remained in perfect order. The officer's initial assumption that this would be an easy, routine stop was unraveling before his eyes. The woman had shown no nervousness, no defensiveness, no signs of guilt. She simply existed in the moment, composed, aware, and unshakable. After a few moments, he stepped back, feeling a mixture of frustration, curiosity, and an odd sense of respect. He had underestimated her, and the realization weighed on him. She had handled his questions and actions with such ease that it left him momentarily speechless. Most people in this position would have shown some hint of anxiety or stress. She had shown none. Finally, she spoke, her tone quiet but firm. "Officer, may I clarify something?" He turned to her, a little wary. "Go ahead," he said. "I've noticed the way you've approached this stop," she said calmly. "You've been following standard procedure, but there seems to be an assumption about who I am and what I might do. I think it's important to acknowledge that assumptions can affect judgment." Her words, calm yet insightful, made him pause. He felt a moment of self-awareness. She wasn't challenging his authority directly. She was simply pointing out something he hadn't fully considered. Her presence and clarity forced him to reflect on his actions and biases. He swallowed, nodding slightly. "I see what you mean," he said, his voice quieter than before. He realized she was guiding the conversation in a way that made him more aware of his own behavior. He had underestimated her, and she was letting him see it without confrontation. There was a moment of silence. The air felt charged but calm, filled with the understanding that this interaction was no longer ordinary. The officer and the woman were now engaged in a subtle, unspoken exchange of awareness and respect. He could feel that he was learning from her presence, from her calm, measured behavior. Then she revealed her credentials. "I should tell you," she said, her voice steady. "I'm a senior FBI agent." The words hit him instantly. He froze, caught off guard. The atmosphere changed immediately. The quiet confidence she had maintained suddenly made sense. Her calm, composed demeanor, her measured responses, her awareness of every detail, they were all rooted in years of training and experience. He had underestimated her completely. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The bystanders who had been watching noticed the sudden shift in energy. The officer took a step back, his mind racing. He had assumed he was in control, but in reality, he had been interacting with someone far beyond ordinary expectations. His respect for her grew instantly. "I didn't know," he managed to say, his voice tinged with genuine surprise. She nodded, acknowledging the moment without any hint of condescension. "I understand. That's why it's important to remain calm and professional, no matter the situation. Assumptions can mislead anyone, even those in positions of authority." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience and wisdom. The officer felt a mix of humility and relief. He realized that this encounter was not only about enforcing the law, but also about learning a lesson in patience, observation, and respect. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension ease slightly. "Thank you for telling me," he said. His tone had changed, less authority, more understanding. He knew that the dynamic had shifted completely, and he accepted it without hesitation. The woman smiled slightly, a small gesture that didn't break her composure, but acknowledged the change in the interaction. She remained calm, aware, and respectful. Her presence had transformed what could have been a simple, routine stop into an encounter filled with insight and perspective. The officer nodded again, feeling a sense of clarity. He understood that he had misjudged her from the start. Her professionalism, calmness, and awareness had left an impression that he would not forget. The stop had started as a routine matter, but it had evolved into an experience that challenged his assumptions and expanded his. Understanding of human presence and authority, she returned her focus to the car, ready to continue once the necessary checks were complete. The officer, now fully aware of the unusual nature of this interaction, proceeded carefully but respectfully. The tension had shifted from uncertainty to mutual understanding, and both of them were aware of the change by the end of the stop. The officer felt a sense of gratitude for the encounter. He had underestimated her, yes, but he had also witnessed a quiet demonstration of composure, awareness, and professionalism that left a lasting impression. The woman had handled the entire situation with ease, demonstrating a level of control and confidence that few could match as she prepared to leave. The officer offered a respectful nod. "Drive safely," he said. "Thank you," she replied, her voice calm and confident. The moment lingered, leaving the officer with a lasting awareness of the lessons he had learned. The routine stop had turned into an experience that challenged assumptions, highlighted the importance of calm and professional behavior, and left him with a newfound respect for the woman who had quietly commanded the situation without force or confrontation. She drove away, leaving behind more than just a completed traffic stop. She left a memory, a lesson in humility, and a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and respect should always come first. After the revelation, the quiet street seemed to breathe a little differently. The air felt lighter, as if the tension that had been building over the past several minutes had finally eased. The officer stood still for a moment, processing what he had just learned. His assumptions had been completely wrong, he had thought. This was a routine stop, a simple matter of enforcing the law and moving on. Instead, he had interacted with someone whose presence, calmness, and experience had completely changed the dynamic. He felt a mix of surprise, humility, and respect. He realized that his initial judgments had been based on appearance and a quick glance at the situation. He had underestimated her from the start, and now he understood why. The woman's demeanor, her controlled responses, and her quiet observation were not signs of arrogance or defiance. They were evidence of training, experience, and a deep understanding of how to handle pressure. The bystanders who had been watching from a distance seemed to notice the change too. They whispered among themselves, some nodding slightly, as if recognizing the rare quality the woman possessed. The interaction had left an impression not only on the officer, but also on those who had been watching. Everyone could sense that something unusual had just happened, even if they did not fully understand the depth of it. The officer finally regained his composure, felt the need to acknowledge the woman properly, to show respect for the way she had handled the situation. "I want to apologize," he said sincerely. "I underestimated you. I acted as if this would be routine, but I see now that I misjudged you entirely." The woman offered a small, polite smile. "I understand," she said softly. "It happens more often than people realize. It's not a problem. What matters is how we handle it once we recognize it." Her response was calm and measured, and it carried a sense of wisdom that went beyond the immediate interaction. The officer felt a wave of respect wash over him. This was not just a driver being polite. This was a person who had mastered the art of handling challenging situations, of staying composed under pressure, and of teaching lessons without force or confrontation. He took a moment to reflect on his own behavior. He had been quick to assume, quick to judge, and slow to recognize the truth of who he was dealing with. In that moment, he realized that encounters like this were more than routine. They were opportunities to learn about people, about assumptions, and about humility. He felt a subtle shift in his perspective, a recognition that not everything could be measured by appearances alone. The woman, meanwhile, remained composed and patient. She did not speak to draw attention to herself, nor did she try to assert dominance. She had revealed her status not to intimidate, but simply to provide clarity. Her calm presence had guided the officer to a realization without conflict. She had turned what could have been a tense or confrontational moment into a lesson in respect and awareness. He nodded, a gesture of understanding and acknowledgement. "Thank you for your patience," he said, "for your professionalism." She smiled again, a small but genuine gesture. "It's important to stay calm and professional, no matter the situation," she said. "It helps everyone involved." The officer watched her as she prepared to return to her vehicle. There was a grace in the way she moved, a quiet confidence that did not rely on force or aggression. She was aware of her surroundings, attentive to the interaction, and fully in control without ever needing to prove anything. It was a presence that commanded respect naturally. As she got back into her car, the officer stepped aside, giving her space to drive safely. He felt a mixture of relief and admiration. Relief that the situation had ended without incident, and admiration for the way she had handled every step, with calmness and poise. He knew that this encounter would stay with him for a long time, a reminder of the importance of humility and awareness. She started the engine and gave a polite nod to the officer before driving away. The car disappeared down the quiet street, leaving behind an impression that lingered in the air. The officer watched until she was out of sight, feeling the impact of the interaction. He had learned more about composure, respect, and human presence in these few minutes than he had expected in a long time. The bystanders, now slowly returning, to their routines seemed to carry a subtle recognition of what had just occurred. The quiet confidence of the woman, the respect she commanded without force, and the lesson imparted through presence alone, all of it left an impression that extended beyond the immediate interaction. It was a moment that spoke to the power of awareness, patience, and the ability to remain composed under pressure. The officer finally returned to his patrol car, thoughtful and reflective. He realized that assumptions can mislead even those trained to observe carefully. He understood that human presence, confidence, and calmness could speak louder than words or authority. This encounter had shifted his perspective and left him with a lesson in humility, patience, and awareness. As he drove away, he thought about how he would approach similar situations in the future. He knew he would be more careful with assumptions, more observant of the calm and composed, and more respectful of individuals regardless of appearances. He felt a renewed sense of responsibility to approach each encounter with awareness and fairness. Remembering the quiet lesson he had learned that day, the woman, meanwhile, continued her journey, calm and collected, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet her presence had left a lasting impression. She had transformed a routine stop into an encounter that challenged assumptions, imparted respect, and highlighted the power of composure and professionalism. Her quiet strength had spoken volumes, leaving everyone involved with a story they would remember. In the end, the street returned to its usual calm, but the impact of the interaction lingered. The officer, the bystanders, and even the woman herself had participated in a moment that was simple on the surface, but profound in effect. It was a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that calmness and awareness can transform interactions, and that respect and humility are powerful tools in every human encounter. The lesson was clear. Underestimate no one, for every person has their own depth, experience, and presence that can leave a lasting mark.